start recording. Okay, so we're recording now, and I'm going to talk about web development. So this is our slideshow. I'm going to go into the slideshow, so I may not see if you guys chat or something like that, but hopefully I'll hear the notification sound. So we're talking about web development, and as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the internet, and then go into a little bit about the technologies that are used to create websites and internet products. And we're going to look a little bit at different platforms and different kind of workflows and how websites are built in the industry. So just to start off with the basics, the internet is known as a network of networks. And so this is a bunch of different computers and other types of hardware connected together via different software and information protocols to exchange information. So that basically means, hardware refers to anything that's actually physically made out of circuitry and screens and, speakers and stuff like that. So your computer, your phone, your TV, if your TV is connected to the internet. These days, your fridge might be connected to the internet. Lots of different things are connected to the internet. Software is the thing that runs on the computer. So it's the operating system like Windows or Mac. It's the browser that you use to access the internet, or the app that you use like Facebook or Twitter. And then protocols are the different languages that computers use to talk to each other. So protocols are things that people develop to basically simplify the things that computers are going to say to each other, to make them faster and more efficient, and to make it so that we can exchange different types of data between different machines. Computers these days all use digital information. So that means that everything that we do on the computer that's communicated to another computer across the internet is done so using a very simple data format, which is binary. So it's every little byte of data or bit of data is just a 0 or a 1. And we use very complex math and logic to turn those zeros and ones into recognizable text and sound and video and other things like that. So we can kind of visualize the internet as a connection of different nodes. And one of the things that makes the internet very powerful is that it's decentralized. And that comes from sort of the history of how the internet was created. There's a lot of different sort of ways that the internet was designed with different technologies. But one of the original motivating factors of the internet were different research centers in the US, both in the government and in private institutions, that were looking for ways to communicate across large distances. And one of the main reasons was to save information in different places to prevent data loss in the case of nuclear attack. This was developed during the Cold War, and everybody was afraid of Russia attacking the US with a nuclear bomb. And so a lot of people in the military were working on designing this like very big data network so that you could back up information in lots of different cities across the country. And so that was a big motivating factor. A lot of the time with different technology, we find that certain specific motivations drive innovations that actually completely change the way that we use technology and use data and communication. And so in these visualizations, you can imagine these different nodes or the dots here as specific computers or specific locations that are connected. And so the internet is not just on the internet, we don't have every single computer connected to every other single computer, because that would be impossible. If you see the far left illustration where every single dot on the outside is connected to a dot in the middle, that would be logistically and physically impossible. What's more possible is where we see the orange dots, where there are certain hubs of information that are then connected to other nodes. That's a little bit more similar to the internet that we have today, where we have servers in specific locations, and those are connected to lots of different machines as well as each other. And then on the far right, where you see the yellow dots, that's kind of what the internet looked like before we had big internet companies with big server farms. We had lots of individual computers that were connected to other individual computers. And the internet, one of the things that it was very good at is figuring out a way to get from point A to point B. So even though each individual node in this yellow diagram isn't connected to every other node, they are all connected via other nodes. So a computer up here can talk to a computer down here by going through all the other computers. So these are a few different paradigms for how a network works. So we have servers today. These are computers that don't have a screen and they don't have a person who's using them. And so essentially we write code that takes requests from people. So when you're watching Netflix, that's the example you see here, Amazon servers with Netflix data. So when you want to watch a movie on Netflix, you don't have to, go to the video store and tell somebody which video you want to watch, and then they give it to you, and then you go home and watch it. You just send a message to a server, and nobody's there, nobody's looking at it. A computer just knows what the message says, and then it sends you back the video. So these servers can hold lots and lots of information. So they hold all the different movies and videos and things on Netflix. And then people from across the world can access that information via the internet. So a few terms to be familiar with. A client is any device, any hardware that is used to access the internet that requests information from the internet or from a server. And so that is all the consumer technology products that we use pretty much all day, every day. Your phone, your laptop, your desktop, your PlayStation, all that stuff is a client. A client means that we're asking for information most of the time. We're not providing information. Although sometimes you can, if you have a website running from your computer, it could become a server. But most of the time, we are using clients. Web browsers are a software client, so that's one of the main ways that we access the internet, and it uses a protocol called HTTP, which is the main sort of protocol, although now we use HTTPS, which is secure hypertext transfer protocol. And that's the main sort of like protocol that says, how do I get from one place to another? How do I ask for this image or this website or this video? So you see the major browsers here. There's other browsers, of course, but these are kind of the main five, although the Internet Explorer one should probably be removed from this graphic and replaced with the Microsoft Edge browser, which is the one that they created to replace Internet Explorer. So protocols, again, are basically languages or sets of rules that tell computers how to talk to each other. And one of the main ones that we're going to use is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This is the beginning of pretty much every web address that you ever access. You may not notice it when you're going to the website, but pretty much every website starts with HTTP or HTTPS. And that's basically telling the browser, this is the protocol that I'm using, so it knows how to communicate with the website. There's another protocol that we used to use in this class, but we won't have to use now because we have more updated technology. That was the file transfer protocol, and this was used to basically copy your code from one place to another. But we're probably not going to use that. Another term is IP address. You guys may have heard of this term before. This is basically a number that represents where you are on the internet. And so if you go to a website and fill out a form or post a tweet or post a Facebook status, usually there's an IP address associated with the computer that you're on that can be kind of used to trace back to who the person was who posted it. These numbers can change. They're not always the same, but they're typically associated with either a device or a network or some other client that is connecting to the internet. And a lot of the time when we're accessing a website, what we're actually looking at is a number that looks kind of like this number they show here, the 70.42.251.42. That's usually actually what the computer is looking for. But we have these things called domain names, which basically map onto those numbers. So it's easy for us as humans to remember words like google.com or facebook.com. But those usually map to some number that the computer just looks up. So it's sort of like your address. If your address is like, 123 Main Street or something like that, this is essentially your address on the internet. So this is what I just mentioned, domain names. These are human readable names that are connected to IP addresses. Uh, and so a little bit more about the ways that we connect to the internet. We used to have to connect physically through a phone line or through a Ethernet cable. These days, most of the time, we're connecting wirelessly, either through radio signals in our Wi-Fi or data signals through our phones. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the web development process. This is not really how the internet works. This is how we create websites. So this is a little bit different. This is thinking about how are websites made by companies, how do we design a website and execute a website. And so this is the process. If you want to make a company and you need a website and you go to hire an agency, this is the process that you're going to go through. If you work at an agency and somebody hires you to create their website, this is, the process that you'll go through from that end as well. So there's a few parts, and this kind of depends on the type of website and the agency and the type of product. But these are usually the four basic components that you have. Creative brief is basically like a pitch. A user experience chart or diagram shows how somebody will use a website. The front end development is the coding for the client side, what we see on our device. And then the back end development is the coding for the server side, how the server receives messages from the client and then responds with information. So creative brief is going to look kind of like a pitch. It may be more visual. This one is a little bit text-based, but sometimes you'll have visuals. And so this is usually what an agency will do if they're trying to get a job or a gig. So a lot of the time, if there's a company or organization that wants a website, they will put out what's called a RFP or a request for proposals, and different agencies will send in their briefs. And if their brief, is good, they will get they'll either get the job or they'll get an interview or something like that. So this is kind of like a pitch saying this is how we're going to make your website, and this is why our version of your website is going to be the best version of the website. And this is something we are not going to do this type of thing in this class because we're just learning the basics. But in later classes like MMP 200 or MMP 460, you will actually make creative briefs as part of your assignment. We're just going to learn some of the basics, so we're going to skip over this part. But we will talk about what it looks like. So in the brief here, you see the goals of the website. You see what the current situation is, so why that means why you need a website. You usually talk about your target users, who will be the people using the website, what kind of devices you have, other aspects of who you're trying to create the website for. The timeline just describes how long it will take to make the website. The budget is how much it's going to cost, so that's usually related to how long it takes and how much you have to pay the different people who work on the website. Staffing is like, how many designers, developers, different people are going to create the website. Specifications has to do with how the website will be implemented and maintained, or actually maintenance is another part. Maintenance is once you create the website, you're still going to have to make updates, and so you'll have an agreement about how that will happen, how you'll update the website, from year to year or over time. So once your brief gets picked up by the organization or the company, then you will start to map out the user experience. This is basically like making a design that shows what the person will actually do on the website. So before we code anything or commit to anything, what we do is we make a sitemap, which has all the pages on the website. We create wireframes, which show the basic layout of the website. And then we show it to users so they can give us feedback about whether this makes sense, whether they know where the right menu is, where to click. We can probably look at some examples of user experience design with the websites that we use for this class. I think the contrast between the Open Lab site and the Blackboard websites that we use may be good examples of good user experience design versus bad user experience design. So maybe we can look at some more in-depth examples. But this is another topic that is a little bit beyond the scope of this class. You'll probably learn a lot more about this in MMP 200 if you take that class. So this is what a sitemap looks like. It has all the pages on a website. So here we see an example of a website for an artist or a gallery. So you have the home page, contact and news page, and then a gallery page with different types of works. So in this case, we have drawing, paint, video. This is just basically to map out how many pages will the site have, what different types of pages will they need, and what kind of information will be on those. Wireframes are basically just drawing the layout of the site so we can get a sense of where all the information will be, make sure that we highlight the most important information, but also make it easy to navigate and include all the information that a user will need to be able to use the website. And wireframes, you can do them by hand. This is an example of a illustrated wireframe, but you can also use Illustrator, or there's lots of other programs that are designed for wireframes. This is another thing that we won't really do in this class because we're only spending a few weeks on this, but when you take other classes in design or programming, you'll spend more time creating a wireframe and really going through the steps of how that works. We're going to learn some basic stuff, so we're not going to know how to even make layouts like this, but eventually you'll get to those more advanced topics. Responsive design is a term that you should all be familiar with that refers to designing websites for different platforms. So this is a relatively new thing, although it's not really that new anymore because we've had the iPhone since 2007, so it's for 15 years. But before that, we just had, pretty simple. We had the same type of layouts because the internet was always just access to the computer. But now we have laptops and desktops and phones and tablets and all sorts of different platforms that we access the internet through. So responsive design is the process of testing your website on different devices and different platforms and making sure that the design looks good in all context. Okay, so now we've done all the design. So we've figured out every page that the website has. We have set up the layout of every website, and we've designed, the branding and the logos and the fonts, all that stuff. And so now we get to actually building the website. And so that's when we do the front end development. And that's the thing we'll focus on in this class for the next, or when we get back from the break, we'll spend a few weeks working with all three of these technologies. So the first technology is HTML. This stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and this is the content of a website. When I'm done with the slideshow, I'll show you guys an example of what that looks like. The CSS is cascading style sheets, and this is what sets the color, the layout, the typography, all of the visual aspects of your website are done through CSS. And then JavaScript is what we use to actually script different behaviors on the website. So if your user has to put in information and we need to save it on the server, JavaScript is what handles those actions. So this is an example of what HTML looks like. And this is the first thing that we'll learn when we come back from break. So HTML is hypertext markup language. It has language that essentially is easy for us as people to understand, but and write, but the computer can turn it into a website. And so we have to use these tags to tell the browser which part of the website we're creating. And then we put the content inside of those tags. So that's kind of what that code looks like. And that's what we're going to start writing when we get back from the break. So here's an example of a simple HTML element. And that's basically what the syntax looks like. We will go over how to write that in our next lesson. So some more HTML tags. and a few more common tags. We'll go over what all of this stuff means when we do a demo, so don't worry about this if it doesn't make sense quite yet. So this is another thing we've been talking about throughout the semester, and we'll go over this when we do our demo because this is jumping ahead a little bit, but when we add images into our projects, which is something that we're going to learn to do when we build our website, just like we have with all of our other projects, we're going to add licensing information to those images if we got them from another source. So this is just an example of how to add credits for a Creative Commons image in a website. So after we do some HTML, our website is going to have some cool information on it, but it's going to look pretty boring. And so we're going to add CSS to add color, typography, and layout to the page. So we see on the left a very simple website with just text that's just black on white. And then we see on the right a little bit more visually interesting website with a blue background, a shadow beneath the text, and some different colors, different font styles. So that's what CSS will do for our website, and that's the next language that we're going to learn. We'll start with HTML, then we'll move to CSS. And CSS looks a little bit different, but you can see the relationship between HTML and CSS. So if we go back a few pages, you can see our H1 tag, which is if we want a big header. So you can see on the web page where it says this is a main heading, we use an H1 tag to create that. And then over here on our CSS, you can see we have H1 again. H1 means header, but the first header, so the most important header. And inside our CSS, we have rules for the style of the font and the color of the text. So we'll go over how to write this after we learn some HTML. And then this is how we connect our HTML and our CSS. So you can see this is an HTML tag that references a CSS style sheet. So again, something that we'll go over when we get into the demo. When we get more CSS rules that we will learn. And then the last bit that we're going to add on top of HTML and CSS is JavaScript. JavaScript is more of a classical programming language in the sense that we actually can make changes to the behavior of the website instead of just the content and the style of the website. So JavaScript is designed to work with the browser, and we can do lots and lots of different stuff with JavaScript. We'll learn just a couple simple basic things. So once the front end is done, that's when we do back-end development. And this is something that we won't get into in this class, but you could get into in some other courses later on. This requires a little bit more of a background in programming and understanding of the internet architecture, but you would learn how to do some back-end development in MMP 350 or possibly some other courses, if you continue with multimedia programming. So with backend development, you're basically just getting data from clients. So somebody on their phone or their laptop is saying, I want a video, or I want to read tweets, or I want to see Facebook statuses, or I just want to read an article on the New York Times. So some server somewhere gets that request, and then it looks at it and says, okay, here's the text from the article, and it sends it back with the styling and everything else. The backend is usually written with different technologies. These days, JavaScript is actually quite popular as a backend technology. In the past, other languages like PHP or Ruby or Python were popular. We also have databases that we have in the backend, which use different languages, so it gets a lot more complicated. Although these days, it's a little bit easier to write backend code than it was 20 or 30 years ago. So this is what it's going to look like when we're writing code, although we're going to use a web-based code editor, so we're not going to have to worry about using files on our computer. So this is kind of what it'll look like, but we're going to use a different program for this, which I'll demo for you guys later. And that's it. That's when we normally would get to start coding. We're going to hold off for today. I will show you guys the website that we're going to use, and then show you a couple things that I think will be kind of interesting given what we've learned so far about web development. But after that, we're gonna wait for the demo until we get back from break. So as I mentioned before, if you've done everything, uh, then you'll be good to go. If we'll have some time for questions related to the other assignments. But a couple of things I want to share with you guys before we leave. So this is a text editor called Sublime Text, which is a great text editor. I actually use it pretty much every day of my life to write code. But to keep things simple, we're gonna use a different editor in this class called Replit, and this is a web-based editor. So if I go to a new tab and I go to the website Replit, replit.com, you can see I'm already logged in. So I'm going to show you guys what this looks like, and I'll put a link to this in the voice chat. So this is just if you want to get started, if you're kind of curious to see what this looks like, you can go check that out, but you don't need to. But Replit is cool because it has everything that we need to make a website built into this one website. So this is called a web-based IDE. An IDE is an integrated development environment. And so it has not just the text editor, but also the ability to preview a website that we're creating. And the cool thing about Replit as well, you guys are probably, obviously hearing lots of stuff about AI and all this stuff, and they have a built-in chatbot that will help you write code and tell you if your code looks good or, needs to be updated and things like that. So there's a lot of cool tools built into this platform that we can just run on the internet without having to install on our computer. Um, so I'm just going to show you guys a couple things so you can get started if you want to. So you can have folders on here just like you can on your computer if you want. So you can see I have some folders for other projects that I've worked on, other classes. I'm going to create an MMP 100 folder here and then open this up. And then you can create a new project very easily by just clicking on this big blue Create REPL button. And then it has a bunch of different templates. And these are for different programming languages. And the default one, for me anyway, I don't know if this will show up for you, but for me, you can see the HTML, CSS, JavaScript template. So if you click on that and give it a name, so I'll call this MMP 100 example, and then click Create, it's actually going to make a little website for me that I can then edit. And it fills in a lot of content for me. So this really helps me get started. And I'll go over all of this stuff from scratch when we get back from the break, so you guys know what all of this means. But it really helps you get started. You don't have to write all these basic things that every single website has. And it gives you all the files, and it also gives you a little website here. So if I actually click on this and open it up in a new page, this is a live website that I can share, anywhere in the world. So it's very easy to create your own website with your own content. And Replit isn't the only program that does this. There's a lot of different programs like this. This is just the one that I happen to be using recently. And so I'm going to show you guys one more thing before I wrap up. So one of the cool things about doing web development is you can actually see this stuff that we've been talking about, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can see that on any website because all websites, for the most part, are open source. That means it's very easy to look at the source, the code that was made to use the website. So if you're using Chrome, the way that you can do this is click on the menu. And, oh, you guys might not be able to see this. Wait, am I streaming? Yeah, I'm just streaming my browser. So you may not see this, but when there's a menu that comes up when I click on these three dots. And under that menu, there's a part that says More Tools. And under there, there's a part that says Developer Tools. And that opens up this little window, which you can see. And every single website has this. So you can see the actual code that made the website right here. And so I can see the HTML. And if I go to sources and open this area here, I can see all the files that made this website. Some websites are very complicated. So for example, if I go to the New York Times website and I do the same thing, I'm going to open up the developer tools. If I go to the elements page, there's a lot of code in here. Okay, so the websites we're going to be creating are not this complicated, but you can still look if you want to see like how does this website work. You can still see all of the content that makes this website run the way it does. You can go to the sources panel and you can see everything on here. You can go to the network page, and if I reload this, you'll see all of the different things that get downloaded when I request this website from the New York Times. So you can see things like we can just look at only their media, or they don't have any media. We can look at their images. So you can see all of the different images here. You can look at their CSS files. You can look at the different fonts they use. So the cool thing about the internet is all of this stuff is open, and so we can change all this stuff. We can look at all this stuff. I can actually change the text here. This isn't obviously changing the real New York Times website, but it changes the way that I see it on my computer. So I could say MMP 100 is cool. And now I have my own headline on my New York Times page. Oh no, they got rid of it. They probably have a script to prevent people from doing that because they don't want people to make it seem like, to make their own fake headlines or whatever. Let's see. I'm going to try that again and see how quickly it gets overwritten. Okay. Oh, I clicked on something by mistake. Anyway, you can see that you can, the web is open. We can see how all these technologies work. Okay, so I'm going to stop there.